Hi, friends. I want you to close your eyes for just a moment, just one moment. And I want you to think about the last time someone told you that you were too much, too loud, too ambitious, too emotional, too sensitive, too needy, too independent, too strong, too soft, too difficult, too complicated, too complicated. Think about that moment. Feel it again. Now open your eyes. Because today we are going to talk about why every single one of those words was a lie. And we are going to talk about the one rule, just one rule, that separates a woman who survives from a woman who is truly, powerfully, magnificently high value. And I promise you, by the time we are done here today, you will never see yourself the same way again. Let me start with a story. There was a woman, and I want you to picture her clearly, sitting in a car in a parking lot. It's 11:47, and then those little girls grow into women who have spent decades practicing the art of being easy, and they wonder why they feel so incredibly hard on the inside. They wonder why there is this constant tension in their chest, this constant low-level grief, this feeling that they are always performing, always managing, always accommodating, always shrinking. It had not even trained to do it. And the training was so thorough, so early, so consistent, so woven into the fabric of every relationship and interaction that most women don't even know they're doing it. They think it's just their personality. They think it's just who they are. They've confused their conditioning with their character. And that is the great tragedy. Because underneath all of that conditioning, underneath all of the smiling and agreeing and shrinking and accommodating, there is a woman of enormous power, enormous clarity, enormous worth. She has just never been given permission to come out. I am giving you that permission. Not because you need my permission. You don't. But sometimes we need to hear someone say it out loud before we let ourselves believe it. So hear me say it. You have permission to take up space. Full, unapologetic, magnificent space. Now let me tell you about standards. Because the word standards gets thrown around a lot, and I want us to get very clear about what it actually means. Because high standards are not about being demanding. They are not about being picky. They are not about having a checklist of requirements that other people must meet before you raise them with your presence. That is not what we're talking about. Standards are about self-knowledge. Standards are a result of a woman knowing who she is, what she values, how she needs to be treated, and what environment allows her to grow and thrive. Standards are not rules you impose on others. Standards are the understanding of what you will and will not accept into your life. And the key word there is accept. Because a high-value woman doesn't try to control other people. She doesn't try to change them or force them or punish them. She simply decides, with great clarity and great peace, what she will accept. And she holds that line. Not aggressively, not angrily, not dramatically, quietly, firmly, consistently. That is the power. The woman who screams her boundaries from the rooftop is still seeking external validation. The woman who holds her standards in quiet confidence, who simply and peacefully walks away from what doesn't serve her without needing anyone to understand or agree. That woman is on another level entirely. Let me tell you about Elena. Elena grew up in a household where love was conditional, not cruelly conditional. Her parents loved her, of that she had no doubt. But their love had terms. Their approval had terms. When Elena was obedient, when she was agreeable, when she made choices that aligned with what they wanted for her, the atmosphere in the home was warm. When she disagreed, when she pushed back, when she wanted something different, the warmth disappeared, not replaced by cruelty, replaced by silence, by coldness, by subtle withdrawal. And Elena, like every child, was a genius at reading the room. She learned very quickly what version of herself was welcome, and she became that version. She became the agreeable daughter, the easy daughter. The daughter who didn't cause trouble, didn't ask for too much, didn't want things that were inconvenient. And Elena was praised for this. She was called mature. She was called sweet. She was called the easy one. And those labels felt good because they came with warmth. They came with approval. So she chased them all the way into adulthood, into her friendships, where she was always the one who was flexible, who adjusted her schedule, who said whatever you want, and meant it because she genuinely could not locate her own preferences. Into her romantic relationships, where she chose men who needed her to be easy and small and accommodating, because that was the love she recognized. That was the shape of love she'd learned. She was 34 years old when it happened. She was in a relationship with a man who, by any objective measure, was not bad. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't abusive. He just consistently, quietly, casually dismissed everything that mattered to her. Her dreams were cute. Her feelings were too much. Her needs were exhausting. And Elena, trained since childhood to make herself fit, kept fitting, kept trimming herself, kept quietly aching, until one morning she woke up, looked in the mirror, and did not recognize herself, not physically, emotionally, spiritually. She looked into her own eyes and saw a stranger. A woman who had spent so long performing someone else's preferred version of her that the real inner had gone very, very quiet, was almost gone entirely. And that terrified her more than anything. Not the relationship, not the man, not the years she'd spent accommodating him. What terrified her was the disappearance of herself. That was her turning point. Not a dramatic fight, not a catastrophic betrayal, just a quiet, devastating moment of self recognition. And here's what I want you to understand about that moment, because this is important. Elena did not wake up that morning and suddenly become a high value woman. That's not how this works. There was no overnight transformation, no single decision that fixed everything. What happened that morning was the beginning of a long, uncomfortable, sometimes terrifying process of coming back to herself, of learning who she actually was beneath all the conditioning, of building standards, not from a place of anger or self protection, but from a place of deep, growing self knowledge. It took her 2 years. 2 years of therapy, of journaling, of hard conversations, of losses. Because, yes, when you start holding your standards, you lose people. We need to talk about that because nobody tells you about that part. When you stop being easy, you lose people who only wanted you to be easy. Sit with that. When you stop apologizing for your needs, you lose people who needed you to believe your needs were unreasonable. When you stop accommodating everyone at the expense of yourself, you lose people who were counting on your self-abandonment, and it hurts. God, it hurts. Because even the people who were hurting you were people you loved. Even the relationships that were shrinking, you were relationships that felt like home. And you have to grieve them. You have to grieve them while simultaneously knowing that you are choosing something better, choosing yourself. And that is an incredibly disorienting and painful place to stand. Elena lost 2 friendships in that 2 year period. Friendships she'd had for over a decade. Women who had been her people, her community, her constant. When she started saying no, when she started being honest about what she needed, when she stopped being endlessly available and agreeable, those friendships couldn't hold the weight of the real her. And she mourned them. She mourned them deeply. And then she built something new. She built a life that fit her actual self, Tata. Now, at 41, Elena is one of the most radiant, grounded, genuinely joyful women I have ever encountered. Not because her life is perfect, not because everything worked out the way she planned, but because every single thing in her life, every relationship, every commitment, every choice is aligned with who she actually is. She is not performing. She is not accommodating. She is simply powerfully, peacefully herself. And that is what a high value woman looks like. Not flawless, not without struggle, not in possession of a perfect life, but aligned, whole, unapologetically herself. Now let's talk about the specific ways women negotiate their standards, because I want to get practical here. I want to get into the real lived daily ways this happens, because until you can see it clearly in your own life, you cannot change it. The first way women negotiate their standards is through the language of flexibility. Flexibility sounds healthy. Flexibility sounds mature, and sometimes it is. But there is a difference between genuine flexibility, the kind that comes from a place of abundance and choice, and the flexibility that is actually self-erasure wearing a mature costume. The flexibility that is self-erasure sounds like this: I don't really mind. It doesn't matter to me. Whatever works for you, I'm easy. And here's the test. If you say these things and you genuinely mean them, if you truly have no preference in the matter, that is real flexibility and it is wonderful. But if you say these things and you do have a preference, if somewhere inside you there is a feeling or a want or a need that you are ignoring, suppressing or overriding in order to make the other person more comfortable, that is not flexibility. That is betrayal. That is betrayal. Self-betrayal. And every single act of self-betrayal has a cost. The cost is not always immediate. Sometimes it accumulates slowly, quietly over years. It accumulates in the form of resentment, low level, sometimes unrecognized resentment. You start resenting people not for what they did to you, but for what you allowed in their presence. You resent them for receiving your accommodation. You resent the relationship for requiring your self sacrifice. And then you feel guilty for the resentment because they didn't do anything wrong, you gave freely. And that guilt creates more suppression, more performance, more accommodation. It's a cycle. And it will spin forever unless you interrupted it or practicing saying what you actually want. Start small. Start with the low stakes moments. What do you actually want for dinner? What movie do you actually want to watch? What do you actually feel like doing this weekend? Practice locating your own preference before you defer to someone else's. Practice saying it out loud. Habis saying it out loud. Practice letting it be heard. You do not have to make it happen every time. This is not about being demanding. This is about knowing yourself, about staying connected to your own inner compass. Because a woman who has lost connection with her own inner compass is navigating life blind. The second way women negotiate their standards is through premature forgiveness now. Forgiveness is holy. I believe in forgiveness deeply and completely. Forgiveness is necessary for your own peace and healing. But there is a crucial distinction between forgiveness and premature forgiveness. Premature forgiveness is what happens when we forgive before we have allowed ourselves to feel the full weight of what happened, before we have honestly assessed the damage, before we have asked for accountability, before we have seen genuine change. Premature forgiveness is forgiveness used as a conflict avoidance tool. It's fine, don't worry about it, that comes out of your mouth before you've even finished processing the hurt. It's the way you rush to reassure someone who has just hurt you because you cannot stand the discomfort of their guilt or the tension in the relationship. Premature forgiveness is, at its root, a form of emotional labor performed for the benefit of the person who hurt you. Think about it. They hurt you, and you rush to manage their feelings about having hurt you. That is not forgiveness. That is service. And you deserve to be more than a service provider in your relationships. Real forgiveness takes time. Real forgiveness requires you to fully acknowledge the wound, to yourself at minimum. It requires you to grieve what was lost or damaged. And it happens on your timeline, not on anyone else's schedule. A high-value woman does not rush her healing to make someone else comfortable. She heals at the pace that serves her deepest well-being. The third way, and this one is perhaps the most universal, is the way women negotiate their standards in the name of love. We are told from the very beginning that love means sacrifice, and there is truth in that. Real love does involve sacrifice. It involves choosing someone else's well-being alongside your own, sometimes in front of your own. It involves generosity and patience and the willingness to be inconvenienced. None of that is wrong, Ifa.